A famous Empire actor, also known as Jussie Smollett, won his appeals case in the Illinois Supreme Court. So his convictions and everything were tossed out. It's really crazy because a lot of folks weren't really riding for him because he basically staged an attack against himself with a noose, basically saying it was MAGA country, and he hired 2 Nigerians to fake a hate crime against himself, hoping to get some attention and hoping that he could further his career by becoming a martyr of sorts. He lied to the police about it. He got charged with disorderly conduct. Well, the reason why he won his appeals case was because, similar to what happened to Bill Cosby, there was a miscarriage of justice. Now, whether or not you think he's guilty or not has nothing to do with the miscarriage of justice that happened here. As he was facing his first charges, the prosecutor began working with him on how to get out of these charges, on basically how to give him the lightest slap on the wrist, some simple community service, $10,000 restitution, and that, he would basically be fine, is what she was trying to do. It was discovered that she was in contact with his family and working with his family on how to get him the least sentence possible. It was unjust for her to be working on that case considering the ties she had to him and his family. So because of that, she had to recuse herself. After recusing herself, she replaced herself, created a fake position for a new prosecutor, assigned him to the case, and had him work out her will. There was no legal right for her to do that. So this new prosecutor goes forward and makes the $10,000 deal. And by doing this deal, he didn't have to admit that he was guilty. He didn't have to admit to lying. He maintained his innocence, and all he had to do was pay this fine and do some community service.
I'm sorry. I know you're sorry. You know how I know? Because you were sorry in kindergarten, you were sorry in elementary, and super sorry in junior high.
Eventually, the governor decides, I don't like the way this is happening. And so they eventually assign a very special prosecutor specifically to look into this case and to try him for it. Once they assign the new prosecutor, the prosecutor begins trying to try Jussie for the same thing. By them trying to charge him a second time for the same thing when he's already come to an agreement, then that means that it's double jeopardy.
Let's just move on to the category for double jeopardy.
You're charging him for the same crime twice. And he already made deals with the prosecution in order, believing that this would actually settle this case and it would be done with. You can't do that. You can't violate a person's rights in that way. The state is making the argument, this guy didn't have any jurisdiction. He wasn't actually legally allowed to be appointed here. So this doesn't actually make any sense, which is a fair statement. However, if that person gets in front of a judge, the judge treats that person as the prosecutor. Now, Jussie responds to this prosecutor and does things under the belief that this is working in his best interest to settle this case, then at this point you can't now go backwards and say, oh, we made a mistake and we get to fix it, so now we're going to fix it by recharging you.
You're at quitties. Any quitties. You're at quitties. No any quitties, no startsies. You can't do that. Can't do. Cannot. Stamped it. Can't do double stamped it, no erases. Cannot. Triple stamped it, no erases. Touch blue, make it true. You can't triple stamp a double stamp. You can't triple stamp a double stamp, Lloyd. You can't triple stamp a double stamp. Lloyd, you guys!
If the state makes an error, the state has to pay. The citizen does not have to pay in those scenarios. So you can't punish Jussie Smollett for a mistake that the state made. Once they do that, they bring up these charges again, they charge him, he goes through trial, everything is settled, and he's convicted. He was sentenced to 150 days in jail and 2.5 years of probation. They said basically that he would get out in 75 days. Immediately he starts appealing it right away, because it really is unfair. You can't charge someone after they've already made a deal. Now you might be arguing, well, but that deal shouldn't be valid considering that it wasn't a genuine prosecutor who was supposed to be assigned to the case. Well, that's for the judge and that's for the courts to have determined before he made these deals. Once he's acted under reasonable suspicion that under reasonable beliefs that this is in his best interest and that this person has the authority to make this deal with him, if he does that, which he did, he paid his $10,000 fine reluctantly. He didn't even want to pay it.
You serious?
Once he made that deal, then that's it. It's said and done. So then to go back and retry this person is unfair. The reason why I say it's a miscarriage of justice and the reason why I invoked Cosby in this scenario is because just like Cosby, this person is being tried for something that they're not allowed to be tried for. If you remember, for the Andrea Constrand case, at that time, they brought Cosby in and they wanted to try to get justice from him because they were trying to prosecute him criminally. But the attorney at the time, the prosecutor at the time said, could not get a conviction against Cosby. He knew he couldn't.
I'm watching you, Wazowski. Always watching.
The reason why he knew he couldn't is because they showed up to Cosby's house, grabbed some pills from him, the pills that he had given to her, tested the pills to see if they were laced with drugs of any kind, discovered that they were not. Then they started questioning her and she changed her stories multiple times. Given that, then he knew, from his own testimony, by the way, he knew, he couldn't get a conviction. Like, if I know that the only evidence we have are these pills, which actually are determined to be exactly what they said they would be, then, and the only evidence that we would have is the testimony of the supposed victim, but the testimony is obviously going to be thrown out, or at least going to be considered extremely sketchy, considering we now have 3 different stories from the same person.
No, he's got a point.
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Then at this point, I know I can't get a conviction. And in Philadelphia, there's a law that a prosecutor can't knowingly take a case to trial that they don't genuinely, reasonably believe that they can get a conviction. So it was actually illegal for him to take this case to trial. His belief was, then what I will do is I will try to get a civil trial. We'll get a civil settlement out of Cosby. And since we're going to do a civil settlement, Cosby doesn't have a Fifth Amendment right not to testify against himself, because that applies to criminal cases. If he makes the deal with Cosby that I will not try you criminally, then Cosby can't then say, I can't testify against my Fifth Amendment. So what ends up happening is Cosby has to actually agree to a deposition in which he's going to be answering questions.
Here goes. I sped. I followed too closely. I ran a stop sign. I almost hit a Chevy. I sped some more. I failed to yield at a crosswalk. I changed lanes in the intersection. I changed lanes without signaling while running a red light and speeding.
Otherwise, he can say, no, I'm not answering a single question in a civil case, because then you're going to use the evidence in a civil case against me later criminally, and so I'm just not going to answer. Fifth Amendment right, I don't have to testify against myself. So no, prosecutor says, I'm going to make a deal. I still want to guarantee that we can try to find what he called justice for Andrea Constand, a person with whom he knew he had no evidence, and which there wasn't enough, she wasn't a viable witness, a credible witness in order to testify against Cosby. So what he did was, he said, okay, I'm making a deal. He published it in a newspaper. Cosby will not be tried criminally. Then he went and did a civil case, did a civil deposition, and that's where we got the pieces of information that the media wildly misconstrued. For example, you'll hear people say constantly, Cosby admitted to drugging women. He did not admit to drugging. Oh, he admitted to, using Quaaludes on them. And it's like, okay, he admitted to having Quaaludes, and he admitted actually to supplying them to women. He never admitted to doing so surreptitiously. So when the media constantly said Cosby admitted to drugging and women, that was just simply not true. He never said that. What he said was he did get Quaaludes, and because girls would ask for Quaaludes, he would give them to them, as Whoopi Goldberg said, and as any other artist during that time will tell you, this was a very common drug, a common practice during that time. Now that he admits to that information, they eventually just settle for some, measly money. Of course, he's a multi-millionaire, almost a billionaire. He doesn't care. Settles that. Case is done. We're done with it, right? Now, later on, after Me Too, prosecutor decides, I want to try Cosby anyway. You can't do that because he had already agreed, I will not be charging you criminally. You can't use the evidence that he gave in this deposition that he couldn't, when he only had to do so because he wasn't allowed to invoke his Fifth Amendment right. Does this make sense? Fifth Amendment says, I don't have to testify. You can't make me testify against myself in criminal cases. Person says, okay, we're guaranteeing you that you'll never be tried criminally. Now you have to testify against yourself. You can't use the Fifth Amendment. You can't then do that and then come back and say, okay, now we're going to try you criminally.
Oh, there it is. What? Here, let me just go ahead and get that from you.
That doesn't work, because now you've just violated my constitutional rights. This is why this is a miscarriage of justice, and this is why, despite his conviction, eventually he was let out of prison and they had to overturn and just completely throw out that case. This is after they took 2 years from him. Now, if I was Cosby in this situation, I'm seeking 2 years of whatever. And considering this is like the end of my life, I'm probably going to be asking for some millions of dollars. Not because he needs the money, because he don't need the money. I need to make a statement because it's an absolute miscarriage of justice. And consider this. If they can do something so gross and disgusting against Bill Cosby with all of his money, what are they doing to your average American African citizen?
Any discussion of this document or its contents will be regarded at the very least as an act of sedition, if not a willful act of treason. Is that understood, Mr. Finch?
Right? What are they doing to you and I? Disgusting. So, with all that being said, back to Jussie Smollett. The same thing happened. He made a deal, he came to an agreement, and once he came to an agreement, then he thought that the case was done. They rebrought the new charges, and the special prosecutor was like, oh no, there's nothing saying that he can't get any new charges. We can't do new. So they gave him 5 felonies for disorderly conduct and so on and so forth. So it was gross.
Deja vu.
So he immediately starts appealing this case. Immediate. When you get to the first appellate court, they vote against him 2-1. Now you would say, okay, well, what's their arguments? Well, Joy Cunningham, Democrat, black woman, she went ahead and sided against his appeal, basically saying, well, you know, the state can do what they want, and you know, there was nothing in this deal that guaranteed he shouldn't be retried, even though it's like automatically assumed that he can't be retried. But we always talk about how representation matters, and here we have representation in that position, and they voted against him 2-1, and Joy Cunningham was one of the people that voted against him.
See this? I'm one of Damasceno's familiars. They needed my help to bring you here to control Nomac.
It keeps running up the ladder. But the one good thing that happened from the situation was that they immediately made the ruling that he has to be released from jail while he goes through the appeals court. Now that the Supreme Court overturned his case, they made this statement: we are aware that this case has generated significant public interest and that many people were dissatisfied with the resolution of the original case and believe it to be unjust. Nevertheless, what would be more unjust than the resolution of any one criminal case would be holding from this court that the state was not bound to honor agreements upon which people have detrimentally relied. Meaning he relied on these agreements on the state to his detriment because he believed that this would actually fix his case and be done with it. So to do that and then be like, nah, I'm sorry, we don't got to keep our word, we're just going to retry you, is not fair. And so that's where the problem came. That's why they had to release him. The most disgusting part about this is I know that prosecutor knows that he made that deal. And just like in the Cosby case, when the new prosecutor was trying it, the original prosecutor, I think his name was Castor, messaged and wrote letters to this guy explaining to him, you can't try Cosby. This is wrong to do for these reasons. I made this agreement and this is a violation of his civil rights. You cannot try him. You cannot use any evidence from this thing. And of course, there would be no other evidence. There wasn't any. You can't use any evidence from a deposition because that's illegal considering the circumstances. The guy didn't care. He just wanted a conviction on paper. He didn't mind violating his rights, which is why we can say that our justice system is not really a justice system. It never has worked properly for us. So at the end of the day, look, I'm not a fan of Jussie Smollett. I think it was really disgusting what he did. I think in the middle of all of this civil unrest from like actual unjust treatment of folks, to create a fake thing in order to center yourself in the center of it, in order to make it so that you get the attention to try to use it for your own personal gain and perpetrate a lie for no reason is disgusting. I'm never going to side with what he did, but I have to side with justice. He got a deal, and that's what happens, and he should be free, and that should be it. What they should have done was, you know, actually investigated this from the very beginning and not allowed this special prosecutor assignment to actually give him that sweet deal. Gave him the honeypot deal, and that's it. You got to deal with that. They got to get their stuff together. Tell me what your thoughts are. I don't think that there's any people out there that genuinely don't think he's guilty. Everybody recognizes that he's guilty. Do you think that the Supreme Court did the right thing? I feel like I explained it very properly. If you disagree, let me know in the comments. Peace.
Escape and float into my